How's it going today, Carl?
Hey, Rasheed, how are you? Long time no see.
Well, Carl, before we get into all of this stuff about Russia, China, well, we're going to get in a little bit about China first, but Russia, Ukraine, Iran, Israel, and the Middle East. I want to get your opinion on the ICC arresting former President Duterte of the Philippines. And by the way, before you answer, everybody call us working on something that if it comes through, it's going to be major for. I'm telling you, it's awesome. But could you go into that, Carl, about how the ICC has no problem pursuing someone that was trying to have an independent policy for his nation, but they have all the problems pursuing Netanyahu, George Bush Sr., and all of these other war criminals, and George Bush Jr.?
Well, Rasheed, ICC is designed for brown people. I mean, it's simple. It's designed for the third world countries. They never meant for ICC to prosecute a member of the so-called collective West, right? I mean, Israel is definitely part in that camp. And now even with ICC a conviction of Israel over issue of genocide, nothing in concrete terms has been done. Instead, they go after Duterte. So what did the Duterte do? I mean, of course, what Duterte's real crime is he tried to pilot a independent foreign policy for the Philippines during his term as the president. He tried to pivot away from its over-reliance on United States to have closer tie with China, with Russia, and particularly to work to diffuse the tensions in South China Sea with China. This is totally unacceptable because for United States, Philippines is the linchpin of South China Sea policy to stir up tensions with China. Philippines is how U.S. can segue into the South China Sea dispute, even though it has nothing to do with United States. But U.S. by claiming that it has a U.S.-Philippine security pact that was signed in the 1950s, that it has the right to intervene in South China Sea. If the Philippines go the other way, U.S. will be deprived of a major reason for intervention in East Asia. So they have to make an example of Duterte. Even though he's now not the president any longer, you have a more pliable puppet, Bongbong Marcos, at the helm, but they have to make an example of him. So they want to make sure there's no more other Dutertes that will show up. And Duterte, he did a thing. He was told that if he came back to the Philippines from his visit to Hong Kong, he will be arrested. But he decided to come back to the Philippines anyway, basically dare them to follow through. And by doing so, just opening up the whole political crisis in the Philippines. Everyone knows Bongbong Marcos, is doing the bidding of the United States. If they arrest Duterte, it's on the behalf of the U.S. And Duterte could choose to stay away, just go into exile. But that's exactly what Bongbong Marcos would like to see happen, to have his political opponent safely outside of the country. And, especially when there's still a very intense competition within the country between Bongbong Marcos, the president of the Philippines, and the vice president, who also happened to be the daughter of Duterte. And so anyone who is a closer observer of the geopolitics understands this is U.S. is out to punish people who didn't toe their lines. And Duterte dared them to do that because he knows if he put his foot down, they will have to. Now they're having a major political crisis in the Philippines. They can't pretend everything is hunky dory. When the news of arrest broke out in the Philippines, thousands of Duterte supporters took to the street to protest the decision. Now and it further exposed the hypocrisy of ICC, right? I mean, they do nothing about Netanyahu, but they go after Duterte. And let's face it, how many people out of the Philippines even care about the so-called all these allegations that were thrown against Duterte? How many people? My guess is very few. Most people don't even know what's going on in Duterte. They're accusing Duterte of not following the legal process when going after drug dealers. A lot of people all over the world, there's not many people have sympathies for drug dealers. Okay, and much less say have something hold against Duterte for going aggressively after drug dealers. But this is something that U.S. is very keen on to prosecute Duterte for, because now they have they want to make an example. They want to make an example of him. So we're gonna have to see how this will play out in the Philippine domestic politics, because now the cat is out of the bag. Now we see this huge division in the Philippines itself, because Duterte was very popular during his presidency. I mean, I lived in U.S. I have a lot of Filipino co-workers at the time, and I asked them their opinion. They're all very supportive of Duterte. They feel like finally there's a leader who cares about the country. Whereas previously they just get Filipino leaders who are eager to line their own pockets, like the father of Bongbong Marcos, who fleeced billions of dollars and stacks them away in American banks, which the U.S. has frozen. Now hold that as leverage against Bongbong Marcos, the son. And a lot of my Filipino coworkers who work in U.S. in IT, even the very young ones, they very much think Duterte is a man for going after the drug dealers, for cleaning up the country, and for finally standing up for the Philippines. And yet, this is the exact reason that he's been punished for.
What's ironic about this is that I was reading a report a few days ago. They're saying that the United States deployed some destroyers, one on the eastern side of Mexico and one on the western side of Mexico, and they were thinking that the United States may launch strikes on so-called drug zones in Mexico. And remember that for the last 40 to 50 years, almost every U.S. president has been fighting a drug war, so-called, and none of them have been arrested by the ICC. And we just had the most recent president and his vice president, Trump and Vance, talking about, if necessary, going into Mexico with the military and killing what they call drug dealers in Mexico. So we see the hypocrisy of this so clear, Carl, that that it is bright as day.
Well, United States government is never going to win a drug war because they can't fight against CIA. I mean, let's face it. How can the U.S. government fight against the CIA, who started this whole thing? CIA had been flooding drug into this country from their proxies in the South and Central America for decades. This is how they get those monies are not in the books that they can use freely to finance their other nefarious deeds. Everything is off the books because of the drug money. And it's funny, wherever U.S. goes, wherever U.S. empire extends its power, the drug trade follows. Taliban, before U.S. invasion of Afghanistan, they almost wiped out opium production in Afghanistan. As soon as NATO invasion of Afghanistan took place, suddenly Afghanistan became like the world's major base for producing opium and heroin. I mean, it's too much of a coincidence. And before that, the biggest base for producing opium and heroin was in the Golden Triangle, in the area bordering by Myanmar, Thailand, and Laos. And that area, again, was seeded and jump-started by CIA by using some defeated Chinese nationalist soldier who got kicked out of mainland China by Mao's People's Liberation Army, and the way they. This reminds me of a lot of the current talks about how United States is now blaming China for the fentanyl crisis in United States. let's remember, when U.S. talk about other countries, it's almost 100% projection. Because in the 1950s, that's exactly what United States did. As China was wiping out opium production inside China, it caused a huge supply shock to the rest of the world. And at the time, CIA was using these defeated nationalist soldiers who ran away to Burma to start a new production of opium over there. And they're flooding the world market. But to cover the tracks, at the time, the U.S. drug czar at the time, in the 1950s, he's claiming Mao is flooding the world with opium, right? They're accusing China exactly what they themselves are doing. And the way they carry out this operation, they didn't have a USAID back then. They had the USAID predecessor, who is supposedly trying to finance rural development in third world countries like Thailand, to build a road in northern Thailand, whose ostensive purpose was to facilitate rural development, but really was to build the road so all the opium from Myanmar across the border can be shipped over through their proxies in the corrupt Thai police and then be exported to the rest of the world. And this same Golden Triangle production of opium heroin eventually got tens of thousands of American GIs who later fought in the Vietnam War hooked, and then brought their habits back to the United States. So CIA has always been involved in the drug trade. How can United States government fight CIA? They're not going to win. They're not even serious about it. I mean, the whole talk about going to Mexico to fight the drug trade is just another way to pressure Mexico to do what U.S. wants, and possibly for more land grab, because right now Trump administration want to grab the whole Western Hemisphere. They want to go to Panama, they want to go to Greenland, they want Canada. Why not Mexico? So yeah, this for them to somehow going after Duterte for being tough on drugs, it does not make sense to majority of the people, outside of the little beltway bubble in Washington. People were like, what? Why are you going after him for going after drug lords?
I want to play a clip for you that's on the lines of what we were just talking about. Just a short clip. And then I want your opinion on this, because we've addressed most of it prior to the clip, but I want to play it to give people a more insight on what we're talking about. So everybody check this out.
Former president of the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte, has been remanded to the International Criminal Court detention facility after being extradited to The Hague. On his way there, he posted a video message saying he will accept responsibility for his government's actions.
Whatever happened in the past, I will be the front of our law enforcement and the military. I said this already, that I will protect you and I will be responsible for everything.
Duterte was intercepted by authorities on Tuesday upon his arrival in the Philippines following a trip to Hong Kong. The ICC charges are connected with his years-long war on drugs, during which thousands of people are said to have been killed. The International Criminal Court's prosecutor says, for now, the ex-leader is presumed innocent.
Mr. Duterte is presumed innocent. He will make his initial appearance before the court soon. And the focus of the office is on the judicial proceedings and on proving its case before the judges of the International Criminal Court. And many say that international law is not as strong as we want, and I agree with that. But as I also repeatedly emphasize, international law is not as weak as some may think.
Analyst at the Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies Institute, Daniel Hugo Santos, believes that the ICC has a double standards approach when it comes to choosing its targets.
The ICC is seen as a double standard as it targets developing countries in the global south. One of it is the Philippines. They would target low-hanging fruits. So, for example, the Philippines right now is the easiest because ICC is taking advantage of the rivalry between Duterte and Marcos. And in the same way, in Southeast Asia, they've warranted arrest on also Myanmar leaders and in Sudan, Omar al-Bashir. So, of course, they were targeting the easiest for them to access. Recently, the new German government said it would not let the ICC warrant Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel. So, as we can see here, it's kind of the double standard. It really depends on the situation, the political situation of the country. For the Philippines, it's going to favor the current government. So, it really depends on the political landscape per country. This wasn't an issue 2 years ago when the Marcos and Duterte families were getting along. They were allies, to be specific. But now that the political situation is divided, the political families are divided in the Philippines, it would be way easier for the ICC to cooperate with the current government.
So, Carl, I know you have a little more insight on this with the political situation in the Philippines. And the reason I bring this to the forefront is because it's on a lot of people's minds, because if they do this to Duterte, then they will do it like they've done it to Charles Taylor of Liberia after using him up, and like they've done it to other people like Slobodan Milosevic of Yugoslavia. But you never see Macron, you never see Steinmeier, you never see anyone like Obama or Biden for bombing and destroying nations. You never see any of them brought up on charges or paraded through the so-called International Criminal Court, which resides in a former colonial nation.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, ICC is not for the first world, Rasheed. ICC is for the jungle. That has been very clear. And with the Philippines, originally Duterte and Bongbong Marcos, they were allies because Bongbong Marcos has pledged he will follow Duterte's policy of independent foreign policy and carry on Duterte's legacy, but that didn't happen. Bongbong Marcos at first made an effort. His first trip abroad was to visit China, but soon afterwards he went to visit Washington and it did 180-degree turn. Like now Philippines is firmly back inside the U.S. camp. They're hosting largest ever U.S. Philippines military joint exercise aiming at China. They're allowing United States to station their troops on 9 Filipino bases, and they're allowing United States to stage their Typhoon missiles in the Philippines that could, have range to hit much of the southern China. And so this is they're doing Washington's betting, and this also made it easier for Washington to go after Duterte, someone they never forgave for pilot independent foreign policy that's not closely follow Washington's bid and call. So this actually is not good for the Bongbong Marcos himself, because now the rift has been more apparent. The Philippines now is in a domestic political crisis. Because a lot of the Duterte's supporters, which there's still many present, they saw how blatant this is intervention in the Philippine domestic politics. But that drama will continue to play out in the Philippines. But for the people outside in the rest of the world, they can see the double standard that ICC presents. Netanyahu is still getting round of applause from all the Western politicians, and now they're clamping down on anyone who dare to criticize Israel. They're literally stripping them of their citizen of their green cards and trying to deport them from the United States just for criticizing Israel. This is crazy stuff. But we have always known this is the way it is.
Mm-hmm. Michael, one of our viewers, Michael says, is Putin still wanted by the ICC?
Yeah, that's they still have a warrant for Putin. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, the ICC is nothing but at this point they did. I give them props for putting Israel on the stands, but again, everyone knew that was symbolic Sorry, 1 second. I gotta all come in.
Okay. So everybody, we'll wait for a second. Call is handling something. Um, let's see.
Okay, I'm back.
All right. So Carl, transitioning from that to what we see going on with Trump, the so-called peace president, who hasn't started a war. We see him bombing Yemen, the Yemeni people. We see, and nobody talks about this part, the constant buildup. He's deploying massive amounts of weapons and armaments into Israel for some major event that is being pre-planned already. We see Israel bombing military bases that are still under some of the people who are diehard loyalists to the Assad camp, which the media doesn't tell you why Israel is bombing those certain areas right there. And we see Israel preparing to go to war in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, and even use Iraqi airspace to bomb Iran. Where's all of this leading, and why isn't anyone talking about the disregard for international law by Israel and the disregard and blatant hypocrisy against international law for Trump and his administration?
Well, see, the thing is with Trump, I mean, he kind of, he dispense with all the facade of, America is out here to do goods. He's saying, like, look, we have the hard power and we get to use it. And we get to use it any way we see fit, like support for Israel, because that's apparently America's number one priority is to support Israel. And Israelis, they're trying to use this opportunity when they have, Americans got their back to maximize their gain in the Middle East. And this is why they're bombing Syria, because now with the collapse of Assad government, and they are finishing the job of dismantling the Syrian state apparatus. So the Syria no longer poses a threat to Israel. This has been Israel's long-term goal, to dismantle states around Middle East, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and the next big target they want to go after is Iran. And Trump so far is fully on board with that. They start with bombing Houthi again, and you have all these supporters taking to social media saying, "Oh, Houthi is going to be wiped out." I'm like, guys, didn't you tweet this like last year? I mean, like, didn't you say like a couple of years ago that Houthi is going to find out why U.S. don't have healthcare? Well, they still don't know why don't have healthcare. I mean, how many times you need to get to be defeated by guys in sandals, and like what kind of humiliation fetish is this? U.S. commander in the Red Sea, at the time he said, this is the most intense naval engagement for U.S. Navy after World War II. And guess what? U.S. Navy lost. And they're not going to win this time. I mean, sure, they're gonna do some bomb and they're gonna televise it. They're gonna say, "Oh, we shock and awe them." U.S. have been doing this to Yemen for 11 years already. This is a war ongoing, going back to 2014, and Yemeni people have suffered blockade, starvation, and they never gave in, and they're not gonna give in this time. And there's really not much U.S. could do other than continue bombing and continue blockading, which is not going to break the Houthi spirit. They're going to continue to resist. They're going to continue to blockade the marine traffic in the Red Sea. And right now they're rerouting 25% of the world marine trade all the way around Africa. And they are the ones that taking a very ethical stance. Genocide must stop. Ethnic cleansing must stop. Otherwise there's going to be no free flow of goods through the Red Sea. U.S. hasn't been able to undo that for the last 2 years, and they're not going to be able to do it this year either. I mean, it's good for propaganda on Fox TV, but I don't fundamentally on the ground the balance the balance of power still haven't changed. U.S. is not gonna. I don't. Even Trump would be crazy to commit ground troops in Yemen. That's not going to happen. And U.S. will try to leverage its air power, its sea power. But if you don't commit troops on the ground, there's only so much bombing you can do. I don't think for a minute they will be able to defeat the Yemeni resistance.
Go to the chat for a second. We have a $50 super chat. Give the claps for the $50 super chat. Thank you so much, Terry Stevenson. I really, really appreciate that. He said, we watched you on the New Atlas, Rasheed, and we really appreciated your points about how everything that is happening today is absolutely related to the failing economy. Thank you both for keeping us informed. Salute to you, and thank you for your support. We really appreciate that. So, Carl, again, Terry just brought up the thing. Would you please go into it just a little bit to tell the people why the empire is lashing out at everybody, specifically and especially Iran, Russia, and China, due to the economic turmoil that it now finds itself in?
Well, Terry already pointed out, it's all bread and circus, right? We're like the late Roman Empire stage. They're just trying to distract the public by throwing them more bread and circus in the Colosseum. Everything is a stage show. I mean, including this bombing of Yemen. They can flex how powerful U.S. military is, but so what? That's not going to change. That's not going to affect the grocery prices. You're still not going to be able to buy eggs in the grocery store. I mean, this is the United States of America, and there's a rush to get eggs. And you are going around bombing Yemen. How is that going to help? It's not. But it will temporarily distract people from their everyday struggles inside United States, and that's exactly what designed to do. Trump make all this noises about they're going to go after Greenland, they're going to go after Canada, they're going to go after Mexico. This all sounds really good, right? Oh, look at muscular U.S. foreign policy. We're finally going to teach this effeminate Canadian Trudeau people, what America is all about. But at the end of the day, we're going to have inflation. Inflation is going to come. Inflation is already in the United States, but inflation is going to get a jet fuel boost because of the tariff hikes. They already level 20% tariff on China, 25%. They said they're going to level 25% tariff on Mexico, Canada. Now, Canada, Mexico, and China, there's three largest trading partner of the United States. So that means the price is going to go up, folks. China is not paying their tariff. China just sell their goods at off their factory at their stated prices. The American importers going to have to pay the tariffs when they import the goods at custom, and then they're going to try to pass the buck to U.S. consumers. I mean, even with 20% tariff on Chinese goods, it's still not going to make American-made product competitive. And at the same time, right now, all these political instabilities is causing a flight to safety because people are selling off more speculative assets like stocks and real estate and keep their money in cash, and that in effect is driving up US dollar. So US dollar is very strong right now, and this is where the Trump policy is very conflicted, because Trump said he wants dollar to keep its world reserve currency, and he threatens the BRICS about, don't even think about dethroning the dollar. But the fact is, if you want to keep the US dollar as a world reserve currency, if you have a strong US dollars, that means US are not going to bring the manufacturing back home, because a strong dollar means imports will still look attractive. People will still going to import, and when 20% tariff is not going to make a difference. Chinese made goods, even after you slap 20% tariff, it's still going to be cheaper than anything made in America. And eventually that 20% increase is going to pass down to American consumers, and that's a tax. That's a tax. All these Americans, they a lot of MAGA supporters, right? They're all about small government, reduction in tax. What do you think tariff is? Tariff is a tax. It's a tax on American consumers, but many people are too dumb to realize it. They think China is paying for the tariff. No, China is not paying for the tariff. You are going to pay for the tariff, and it's a tax. It's a government tax. You are willingly paying to the United States government if you support U.S. Trump's tariff policy. And it's not going to do what it's intended to do, which Trump says is to bring manufacturing back home, because to really reindustrialize United States, that's a multi-generation effort. You're going to need to invest in education. You're going to need to invest in infrastructure, because United States need more skilled people, skilled workers. Not right now, all the smarty pants go to the Wall Street, because that's where the money is made. They're not going to the advanced manufacturing. They're not going to go into the research and development. They're all going to the Wall Street. This is why U.S. had to import a lot of the foreign-born PhDs into the country, because a lot of the talent deficit happens is because the smartest native-born Americans, they're going to the Wall Street because they understand that's where money is made. They're not going to go work long hours in a lab and getting paid a pittance. Only the foreign-borns who are willing to put up with that kind of shit. So this is and the system. This system has been rigged for a long time, and without changing the system itself fundamentally, they're not going to turn it. They're not going to be able to turn it around and reindustrialize America. There is a deficit of skilled workforce. There is a deficit of infrastructure, but these are all long-term investment and long-term. It requires long-term planning. Trump is not going to be around for that. He's planning for the next 4 years. He's not thinking what happens in the next 10, 15 years. So yeah, that's not going to happen. This is just going to lead to higher inflation. But you don't want people to focus too much on the egg prices. So what you do, you bond Yemen. You bond Yemen. You voice your full-throated support for Israel. And then you get people's attention focused elsewhere than watching what's happening to their wallet. Because if you focus on too much on watching your wallet, it's too depressing. Just stay glued to the Fox TV. To watch the shock and awe American bombing. That might play for a while, but I think eventually people are going to wise up. But maybe Trump's strategy is by the time they're wising up, it doesn't matter. It's the end of the 4 years. So, yeah.
I want to play a clip. I played this clip on one of the programs before, and this is a professor talking about the impacts of U.S. tariffs on China and the impact they will have on the United States. And then after, we'll come back and get your take on it, Carl.
Let's bring in Steve Hanke. He's a professor of applied economics at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. Professor, do you think there will be some kind of compromise in this tariff war between Mexico and the United States, also Canada?
Well, not really, because President Trump has many contradictory ideas, many things floating around in his head. But when it comes to trade, he's a mercantilist, and his view is that the foreigners are basically engaged in nefarious activities that cause the U.S. to run a trade deficit. And he thinks that trade deficit is bad. The problem is it's just nonsense. The trade deficit in the United States is created in the good old USA because there is a deficit of savings relative to investment in the United States. And by definition in economics, that deficit is filled by a trade deficit. Foreigners come in and fill a deficit. Now in China, for example, they have just the opposite situation. They have a savings surplus relative to investment. So internally, China creates the conditions for what has to be, by definition, a trade surplus, which they have. Same thing in Japan, same thing in Switzerland. But the US has had a trade deficit for a long time, since 1975, and it's all created by America. It's not created by foreigners. Foreigners just fill a void.
So, Professor, I just want to make sure I understand. Explain to us how tariffs work, if you will. Who will be most affected by these tariffs, by these tit-for-tat measures? At the end of the day, is it the American consumer?
Well, yes, to some extent, it's the American consumer. But the main thing that happens with tariffs, if America puts tariffs on, the cost of imported inputs into the production process, into manufacturing, go up, and actually it hurts exporters. People don't realize, once you look at how it works, there are three elements that are affected. One is people directly consuming. Let's say they're buying avocados from Mexico. Well, they're going to pay more from the avocados, or bananas from Ecuador. They'll pay more for those. So that's a direct consumer. But there's an indirect aspect, and that is manufacturing operations that import inputs, parts and things that are needed as inputs to manufacturing. They will get hit, and those manufacturers will be hurt by their exports will be more expensive. So the exporters will be hurt. And the third party is, of course, just the middleman who is in between the exporter and importer. Right. They get hurt too.
So Professor,
it's just a loser's game. Everybody loses.
And when consumer confidence is down with all this uncertainty about tariffs, are you perhaps concerned about a recession?
Well, I'm concerned about a recession because of one main thing. The stock of money in the United States is lower today than it was in June of 2022, and that's only happened 4 times in the United States history since 1913, when the Federal Reserve was established. And all 4 of those times, with a contraction in the money supply, you have a slowdown that results. And that slowdown, I think, will be occurring this year in the United States. And consumer confidence is going down, and that will just aggravate it, you see.
So let me get this straight. We're running out of time, and if you could just reply this to my question as briefly as possible, Professor Hankey. Is there a better way here than imposing tariffs on Mexico, China, Canada, and starting April 2nd on a host of other countries as well?
Yes, the best way is free trade. Why should the government be involved getting in between a buyer and seller who are agreeing on the price and terms of a trade? This is the government coming in and saying, no, you can't do that, or we're going to tax you, or we'll put sanctions on you, or something, some other interference. Free trade.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor Steve Hankey.
By definition of what he just said, the government getting in bed with corporations and making policy through the dictate of corporations, that's fascism. So what he is saying, that America is a fascist nation in so many words, because with all of the rhetoric talking about free trade, the policies does not match the rhetoric, which means that it is not China that the world should be looking at. It's the United States that has become more and more dictatorial and fascist, and that this is why they're lashing out because I noticed he said this. He said 4 times in the United States where certain things happened where right after that we had something like a recession or something. But the problem with this time is America does not have the political capital. She doesn't have the manufacturing base. She doesn't have the reserves. She doesn't have the gold. She doesn't have the silver. And now when this comes down, this will be far more than just a recession. We're talking about the word that no one likes to utter. We're talking about a Great Depression. What do you say about that, Carl?
Well, I mean, this basically the crack was already shown by the great financial crisis, the GFC back in 2008. That was United States really truly recovered from that. They try to patch up things by printing walls of money, shit tons of money. And that only made the matter worse because U.S. society has been financialized up to the wazoo. Everything is financed by debt, and we all know that debt is unsustainable. At some time, we don't know when, but the reckoning will be coming. And what Trump is doing is only making the matter worse. Like the guest has spoke about. A lot of the American manufacturers, they actually import Chinese parts. Ford, this is what Ford CEO Jim Farley said. He was very upset at the Trump tariff because a lot of American cars use of Chinese parts. And a lot of Americans don't even realize that. Yes, a lot of parts that goes into Ford are made in China. And Trump tariff is going to make Ford more expensive. American manufactured goods themselves are going to be more expensive because other imported components from China has gone up in price. And right now, like all these Trump policies, it's like Trump is making the appeal to burnish his populist image. He's posing as his populist leader, giving to American what they want, which is America first, blah, blah, blah. But everything he has done is only exacerbate the problem. Right now, United States, a lot of the U.S. problems that really needs fixing is fundamental changes at a society level. Like this is what happened. You have a trade deficit because Americans are not saving enough. And they're not, they go into debt to finance their consumption binge. And why is that? It's not because Americans are fundamentally fiscally irresponsible. It's because the government had printed so much money and they have encouraged people to take on debts. All the banks, they encourage you to go into consumer debts. Because with all these available free money that government is printing, they're handing out these free money they got from the government, and they're trying to loan you what they may call low interest rates. Even though now that interest rate is also going up. So eventually, this house of cards will have to come down, and it's not going to be pretty. Everybody kind of anticipated this. All they can do is kind of delay the final reckoning. I mean, Obama did that by essentially nationalize a lot of the American auto industry, American banks, just by print more money. How long can this Ponzi scheme keep going? It's anybody's guess, but we all know it's not going to be pretty when the house of cards finally blow up.
Mm-hmm. And so, with that said, Carl, this article comes out on yesterday. It comes out yesterday, and it's called "The U.S. is not prepared to win an economic war against China. Built container ships, farmers, ocean carriers warn." Now, the first part of this says the U.S. is considering steep fines on container ships made in China as a way to help revive domestic shipbuilding. from global ocean carriers to U.S. farmers. Business interests are warning that the economic consequences will be devastating. The World Shipping Council estimates that the rules being considered by the U.S. Trade representative would soon cover 98% of all liner vessels calling on U.S. ports. Business interests from U.S. farmers to global ocean carriers are warning of severe economic damage from proposals being considered by the U.S. government to hit container ships made in China with steep fines when they call on U.S. ports. The goal of bringing more shipbuilding back to the U.S. is at odds with the reality in the global ocean trade market, they say, where virtually all container traffic will soon be carried on ships built in China. Now, saying that, and we look at the policies of them bringing back shipbuilding and manufacturing, the policy seems to be undercutting the very words that they say to the American people, and without regard for the interests of the American people, they are now attacking China, cutting off their nose, their tongue, their ears, and poking themselves in their eyes despite their face.
You know, U.S. Trump thinks tariff is a magic bullet that will fix everything. But look, if you raise the tariff, let's say they raise the tariff on container ships. You know, they ban all the Chinese container ship coming from United States. Well, you need something to replace it, right? Well, right now there's only like 3 major naval shipyards in the United States. How long it will take them to ramp up production? Let's say everything is according to the plan. You know, they're bringing shipbuilding back to the United States. It will take years to bring a new shipyard into operation, right? What are you going to do in 4 or 5 years while a new shipyard is being built? You know what? When no container ship are coming to your ports, and you are trying to build a new shipyard in those 4 years, what are you gonna do? I mean, you're screwed. You're like, okay, this is the thing. It's not tariff is not like the magical silver bullet. If you really want to accomplish what you say you want to do, which is reindustrialize America, you have to have a broad-based coordination across all industries, all societies. United States government is not built for that kind of thing. You know, China do have such a government. You know, they can mobilize all the resources in the society and have policy to implement policies that try to funnel those resources to a certain stated goal. But U.S. government is not, shaped for that kind of thing. They can. Trump think you can just. This is, by the way, very American mentality. They, shortcuts. Like it's like all these like weight loss plans that they advertise. Take this magic pill, you will solve all your problems. Suddenly you look like a supermodel. With 6 packs. But it doesn't work that way. If you want to lose weight, you actually have to put into the hard work. You have to work out regularly. You have to, watch what you eat. It's a long-term process. It takes a good 6 months, 1 year to see dramatic changes. But this is not what Americans want. This is not what Trump wants. Trump just wants this one magic pill, and he thinks it's tariff that will fix everything. That's, again, to restart U.S. manufacturing, any kind of factory, opening new mines or setting up a new factory, it takes a few years before you can start production. The question is, what are you going to do in those few years? Well, there's no production and you're cutting yourself off from production from China. And you see what they're doing to Venezuela. Trump said they're going to levy 25% tariff on any country who import Venezuelan oil. And of course, United States itself imports Venezuelan oil, but Trump gave Chevron an extension. Of course, he gave Chevron an extension for continuing their operation in Venezuela. And this, again, is aimed at China because China buys majority of Venezuela's oil export, somewhere from 55% to 68%, and that means another 25% additional tariff on all of China. And this is crazy because China is not gonna back down on this, because they're not gonna say, "Oh, we're gonna cut off our ties with Venezuela to comply with U.S. sanctions," because they understand if they back down on one issue, Trump will extreme Trump's character, when he senses weakness, he will pounce. He will keep on piling on. So, another 25% additional tariff on China. This is we're gonna see some real economic pains very soon in this country. The way the inflations are going. I mean, I thought inflation was bad when I when came back to U.S. for a visit back in 2023. Like my son screaming for a frozen banana in North Carolina Zoo, and I had to pay $8 for a frozen banana. This was in 2023. I can't imagine, what the Trump tariff will do to the prices in the coming years. I think a lot of industry have already stockpiled probably imports from China in anticipation of the tariffs. But again, it's we have to see how those tariffs gets implemented, because Trump himself kind of wishy-washy. He has postponed the implementation of the tariff on Canada and Mexico for many times. But what the business really hate is uncertainty, right? And Trump is creating a lot of uncertainty right now in the market. People don't know how those tariffs are going to be implemented, whether they're going to be implemented, and a lot of businesses are putting their planned purchase on hold because of this. And this is going to cause economic slowdown. So, but we won't see this. There's going to be a delay effect. If you think inflation right now is bad, wait like another 4 months, 6 months, you will get much worse. And we'll see how Trump deal with that. But I have a feeling they're gonna enjoy he's gonna enjoy his popularity right now among at least among the MAGA crowd. But eventually, I think people will wake up, because this is not sustainable.
And I think also the reason he's hitting at Venezuela with that is because Venezuela and China has that yuan trading swap agreement, where China can purchase the oil using the yuan, sidelining the dollar. He goes after Panama because of the shipping through there. He wants to control that. I believe that's a part of the choke strategy to break China's trading routes for the Belt and Road Initiative, so that the United States can bring China to yield, and they think that they can blackmail China and control China's policies and position. What do you have to say?
I mean, I think you nailed it on the head, Rasheed, because when United States have been talking about Chinese control of Panama Canal since 1998, when Hong Kong billionaire Li Ka-shing's CK Hutchinson Logistic Company have assumed operation on ports on Panama Canal. And, anybody with same mind would realize for China to control Panama Canal is insane. They would have to project power all across the Pacific Ocean. But when United States talking about China controlling Panama to choke off vital supply lines, again, it's a case of 100% projection, because this is what U.S. exactly intend to do by taking direct control over Panama Canal. They can interfere with China's trade with Latin America. They can interfere with all the Chinese shipment to all the Belt and Roads Initiative projects in the rest of Latin America, and the fact that the Hong Kong-based CK Hutchinson recently was pressured to sell all their operation, not just the ports in Panama Canal, but also their ports on Suez Canal, total of 43 ports in 23 countries to BlackRock Group, which Trump applauded as one of his victory. This actually shows China do not control CK Hutchinson company, because if China really control the company, they should tell them don't sell. But the fact that the Hong Kong billionaire Li Ka-shing sold those to BlackRock, it shows that in fact it's not a company controlled by the CCP, by the Communist Party of China. It's a private company making decisions based on their business, because they didn't want to get caught in between the U.S.-China geopolitical fight. And they realized, by having these overseas ports, it's going to open them up for further extortion from the Trump policy. So they rather cut the losses and focus on their China operations. Now, China actually not very happy about this. A lot of the Chinese media are saying are criticizing this move. But again, if China really had control over CK Hutchinson, they would just have told them no, don't sell. But again, what United States, why U.S. want to control these ports? Because now it gives them leverage. They can potentially deny all these Chinese shipments that go into all these China finance Belt and Road Initiative projects in South America. Venezuelan oil now will be under more scrutiny if they try to go through Panama Canal to go to China, because as you mentioned, China do have these swap deal where Venezuela is providing 48,000 barrels of oil per day to China, instead of under a swap agreement, instead of using US dollars. And this is, U.S. apparently didn't like that. And so we're going to have to see how that plays out. I don't think China will concede at this point. On a state, this is like a state to state level deal. China unlikely is going to, pull away from its Venezuelan investment just because the U.S. pressure. And besides, it just makes a lot of more economic sense, because a lot of the independent oil refiners in China, called teapots, they're already operating in a low margin environment. So I don't think they can afford to give up on importing the heavy Venezuelan oil. And they will look to their government. They will look to the Chinese government for guidance on whether they should continue, because Trump tariff is aimed at, not just say those oil refiner, but aim at all of China if this happens. So it will be the Chinese government that will send the directive whether to continue to import Venezuelan oil. And I think that China will continue to do so, because China is already in the midst of the tariff war with United States. So be it. China has kept its powder dry in the last 7-8 years when U.S. was slapping sanctions left and right on Chinese entities. China hasn't so far, moved aggressively on counter sanctioning United States. So China still have a lot of room to maneuver. So we're in the very initial stage of this trade war right now. It will probably intensify, and we'll keep you guys updated.
I want to go back to one of the comments made by Perseverance Chameleon, and I think it was a very apt comment. Perseverance Chameleon says the U.S. can't compete economically or militarily. That's why they are setting fire everywhere so that they can attempt to regroup and maintain their hegemony. Now, on that, that's why I said they're after the Panama Canal. They're after bringing Venezuela to yield, because Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world. They're causing chaos all across Africa. They are attacking the Houthis. They're bombing Syria and Lebanon. They're after Iran. And most people say that this is about a nuclear thing, but we know it's not really about nuclear. What it's about is the underbelly of China and Russia, but specifically and especially China because they want to break the Belt and Road. They want to break it through the Panama Canal. They want to break it through North Africa, and they want to break it through West Asia while they control. They think they can control the Malacca Straits and all of these areas around there, so that they can shut China off land, air, and sea and bring it to yield. How do you think these plans will work?
Oh, I don't think they will work at all because what U.S. is trying to do, as you mentioned, they're trying to retrench back to consolidate their hold on the West Hemisphere, particularly in Latin America, and the right now like I said many times before, for U.S. Navy to block the Strait of Malacca is a fantasy because they will not just be blocking China. They'll be blockading the entire world because China trade with the rest of the world, and at least it will block all the countries in East Asia. It's gonna basically turn everybody against United States. I mean, this is and besides, this is how do you even do something like that? Has U.S. Navy ever even practiced such a ambitious operation? No, they haven't. I mean, this right now, this is just a lot of talks by a lot of armchair generals. And again, but China has done its best to de-risk from United States. This is why they're building tons of ports all over the world. That they have alternatives. They have now a land bridge over Eurasia that connect to Russia. They have the Arctic route that's opening up because thanks to the global warming, now they can sail to Europe through the Arctic. That's actually faster than they would sail to right now going around Africa because now people can't go through the Red Sea because of Houthi blockade. So there's a lot of like U.S. Navy cannot be at all places at all time. That only exists in the fantasies of Hollywood. And so China is not really worrying about being blockaded by U.S. at this point. But United States, they still try to maintain their hegemony, at least like local hegemony in the Western Hemisphere. This is why they're going after Panama Canal. They're going after Venezuela. They try to claim Greenland, Canada, etc., etc. But so far, it's more rhetorics and PR spins. Like Trump said, "Oh, it's a great victory" when the Panama president announced they will pull out the Belt and Road project with China. But there were no major BRI project in Panama in the first place. So it's like, so this is a pure PR victory. And again, nobody thinks that China is seriously going to choke off the U.S. supply line through Panama Canal. So by forcing C.K. Hutchinson sell their rights to BlackRock, this is more like Trump giving his buddies in the Wall Street, a little crumb, little juicy piece of action. Overall, I don't think U.S. has a comprehensive strategy that's actionable to contain China at this point. I mean, they're failing even in the propaganda front. Trump himself dismantled all the USAID infrastructure around the world because Trump thinks we don't need to do soft power anymore. U.S. can just flex his hard power, so they didn't need to spend on all these like CIA cutout, CIA fronts, which is great, by the way. And then you have people traveling. I Show Speed was in China. He just did a 6-hour live stream. This man has like 37 million followers on YouTube. His live stream in China was watched by 5 million people on YouTube in the first 24 hours. I mean, this is like all these billions of dollars spent on anti-China propaganda just went up in the smoke in one live stream, right? Like because a lot of the people, all these CIA deep state people, I don't think they still kind of they still haven't come to grip with the power of social media, as much as they try to leverage for their own purpose. I show speed, he goes to China, boom, people saw, wow, China is not what we expected to be. Like they don't look oppressed. In fact, they look like they're having better life than us. And so I'm still very optimistic about the future. I think right now a lot of the damage the Trump administration can do is actually to United States. There's a lot of the problem U.S. face today is self-inflicted, and Trump is not making that better. He's gonna make it much worse. And right now, this is like what Trump is doing, dismantling the traditional U.S. alliance network. That has make people rethink their strategy of antagonizing China on behalf of the United States. This is why there are already people in voices in Canada, in Australia, in Europe, and saying, okay, why are we going to have a trade war with China when the United States is the one that's going to impose tariff on us? Like, shouldn't we seek alternatives to the United States? Maybe we should have better ties with China. I mean, those voices might not translate directly into policy actions, but the ball is already got started rolling, and this is all thanks to the Trump policy. So in many ways, Trump is helping. Trump, he doesn't know it, but Trump is helping China to gain more international acceptance. He's helping China's international stature to grow. This is why a lot of Americans don't realize this. Trump is very popular in China because a lot of the Chinese the common Chinese joke on the Chinese internet is Trump is here to make China great again, and he's doing a great job.
I believe that when desperation sets in, and I do believe that desperation is starting to set into the halls of D.C., London, Brussels, Berlin, Paris. They're looking at a new paradigm, a paradigm where the Western world doesn't dominate, where the Western world cannot dictate or cannot cower nations. And I believe this is forcing them to act irrational and acting out, trying to throw anything up against the wall to see if anything sticks. And that brings me back to J.D. Vance. And what I call this is naked capitalism and naked imperial aggression. I just want you to listen to, I know you've seen this before, but I want to let you hear Vice President Vance on his take on taking and the justification for wanting to take Greenland, even though we know that would be a move to try to checkmate Russia and checkmate China.
Denmark, which controls Greenland, it's not doing its job and it's not being a good ally. So you have to ask yourself, how are we going to solve that problem, solve our own national security? If that means that we need to take more territorial interest in Greenland, that is what President Trump is going to do, because he doesn't care about what the Europeans scream at us. He cares about putting the interests of America's citizens first.
Oh, again, he said to take more territorial interest. And in layman's terms, that's the diplomatic word for seizing nations and seizing territory from people illegally, and we don't care what anybody else says. Rules for thee, not for me, and I can do it if I designate that it is necessary for America.
This is gaslighting per excellence from Vance, because he said Denmark has not been a very good ally. But if you actually look at Denmark's record, they're participating every America-initiated NATO operation. In Afghanistan, in Iraq, they were wholeheartedly behind everything that U.S. took the lead on. And this is what they've been rewarded with. This has been publicly berated by Vice President of the United States for being not a good ally. And for the reward, United States is going to take away 98% of their territory, which is Greenland. And so, everybody can see this. Everybody has a television who have access to social media can see this. This is what United States do to its most pliable allies. In fact, this is a lesson that Europeans need to understand. They don't win U.S. respect by being a pliable puppy dog. If anything, that makes the U.S. even less inclined to respect them. You know, this is, you know, you will never gain respect by being a poodle, and you're just gonna invite more abuse. And you know, Denmark will be made an example of, and this is the rest of the EU states should take notes. This is what happens. Even if you follow U.S. orders to a T, they can still, you know, they can still cannibalize you because they, you know, that's what they want. and this is why one of the reasons U.S. has resort to cannibalizing its allies is because, you know, even Marco Rubio has recognized the unipolar moment has passed. Now it's a multipolar world. So U.S. is out for itself in a more a naked, self-interested manner. It will openly resort to, I mean, before, you know, in Biden administration, we already said the U.S. was cannibalizing its allies by, for example, forcibly deindustrialize Germany by blowing up its vital infrastructure, Nord Stream, and forcing and making essentially all the German industrialists come to United States with their factories where the gas is cheaper. But now it's more openly cannibalizing by taking territories. So that's going to be the fate of Europe if they keep on following, you know, United States, even though U.S. is openly giving them the middle finger right now. And I don't understand what the European leaders are doing right now. Then they're still talking about, oh, we're going to go form our own. We're going to support Ukraine without United States. We're, you know, like Canada is talking about forming a alliance with the rest of the Europe without United States. This is all crazy talk. At some point they have to wake up. They have to wake up on the dream and face reality. And that is, you know, maybe it's better to work to look out for your own self-interest in this world, and that might mean to actually play diplomacy and to have a rational foreign policy toward countries like Russia and China, who are realistically the other poles in the multipolar world, and that actually can afford them some sort of strategic independence from the United States, so they don't have to be at the whim of, you know, Trump administration all the time.
And this is what some of the people who were in the government of the United States has to say about their thoughts on the United States. Let me play the short.
The United States is the most lawless and dangerous country in the world by far. You cannot believe how much misinformation we get every single day. Because I have advised more than 100 governments around the world. I have seen things with my own eyes. I've seen U.S. CIA coups with my own eyes. Governments lie, but superpowers make super lies. And if you're running the largest war machine in the world, hey, you are going to lie all the time. The entire Iraq war was not because they thought there were weapons of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction was the outcome of a focus group inside the Pentagon. How are we going to sell this war to the American people? Who made the decision 2 days ago that ATACMS can shoot deep inside Russia? Another brilliant move. We don't even know if the President of the United States is compos mentis right now. We have a deep state that takes these decisions, not a word of explanation to the American people. It's all lies. And I've seen it all through my life because I've been advisors to prime ministers and to presidents and to central bank governors and to some of the wonderful people on this panel. And I've seen a lot.
And he described it aptly, but I want to follow that up with what he said about who runs the U.S. government. So that, and then I want your comment after that. So check this out.
There's a wonderful, I don't know, wonderful. My wife doesn't like me to use that word when I refer to President Putin's statements. I will say just very accurate. And that is in an interview that President Putin gave to Le Figaro in 2017. He has an observation which I found very astute or very accurate. He said, you know, I've dealt with 3 presidents now, He says they come to office with ideas, but then soon enough, the men in dark suits and blue ties show up and tell them the way the world really is. And that is why things continue as they are, essentially, no matter who is in office. And I think that there is a great deal of truth to that. When I look at foreign policy from Clinton, who was a Democrat, it's the economy, stupid. But he was the one that initiated the NATO enlargement. He was the one that bombed 1992, bombed Serbia in 1999 for 78 straight days. Then George W. Bush Jr., who had the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and who further enlarged NATO and then committed NATO to expand to include Ukraine and Georgia. Then Obama, the man of peace, the man who won the Nobel Peace Prize right at the start. And then he signs the order for the overthrow of the Syrian government. He invokes NATO to overthrow the Libyan government. He sends Victoria Nuland to overthrow the Ukrainian government. Well, come on. This is not proper behavior or in line with the public perceptions and precepts. Then Trump, he continues the arming of Ukraine. He, of course, doubles down on Israel in the Israel-Palestine disaster and tragedy, making things work. He rejects a peace agreement with Iran, which would have denuclearized Iran in return for dropping U.S. sanctions. So he leaves the world less safe. Then Biden, who's supposedly the opposite of Trump, comes in. And what does he do? He refuses to negotiate with Russia. He relishes the Ukraine wars leading to Finland and Sweden joining NATO. He continues to pledge, at disastrous cost to Ukraine, by the way, that NATO will enlarge to Ukraine. It leads to ongoing war. It leads to destruction of Ukraine. It leads to the impossibility of a peace agreement. And that's Biden's policy. So that's 5 presidents in a row that I think have made me much less safe than we were in 1992, when the Russians had just become independent and said, we want to be friends with you. And the United States said, well, that's fine. Get in line and, respect us, because we're going to run the show now. And this is essentially our circumstance. We are more in danger, but every president, supposedly left or right, basically has listened to the men in the dark suits and blue ties.
What do you say about that, Carl?
I mean, what can I say? He was in the Jeffrey Sachs was in the midst of it, and I remember he famously said, people in Washington are stupid, and I know because I know some of them, but he's absolutely right about the deep state running things, because I remember President Putin related a story. This is back when, in the early 2000s, when President Putin proposed to Clinton that he wanted to have Russia join NATO. And Clinton said, okay, sounds good. Let me check with my people. And after a few days, Clinton comes back like, sorry, I checked with my people. They said no. Right? This is the president of the United States, supposedly the leader of the free world, right? Who it really tells you who's really running things. He has to check with his handlers to make sure that's a correct path to go down. And but right, you know what? But with the Trump, it's more entertaining. Like someone in the comments said, I completely agree. I mean, because Trump is Trump has done a lot to dismantle. People are saying, oh, like him destroying the USAID is just, it's just refocusing, bringing it under the larger umbrella of State Department. Totally correct. But regardless, what Trump is doing currently is doing a lot of damage to the U.S. deep state because of personal vendetta. Because let's face it, the reason Trump is going after USAID, of course, it's not because he's like care about because these USAID, because Trump doesn't care about the fact that USAID was financing color revolution around the world. That's not what Trump cares about. What Trump really cares about is the CIA and the intelligence services really went after him during Biden administration. For Trump, this is personal. This is vendetta. This is time to get revenge and get even. And I'm all for it. Because in dismantling USAID and a lot of these CIA cutouts, it's actually doing a lot of damage to the U.S. imperial system, and I'm all here for it. And I really I kind of enjoy all this chaos is introduced to the U.S. Political system. And like I said, I'm still here with the popcorn watching unfolds. It's all entertainment for me. This is why I laugh all the time, because I really enjoy it. I really enjoy to see the U.S. empire going down in flames.
I was looking at something yesterday and I saved it. It was a post from Arnaud Bertrand on X, and this is what he said. And in his post, he had a snapshot of Jack Ma and what is coming out now. But he says, this is big. I think we're reaching the stage where we can confidently say that China has defeated the U.S. semiconductor sanctions. Alibaba just announced that they've developed AI training techniques using Chinese-made semiconductors, where they achieve results comparable to NVIDIA H800 chips and reduce costs by 20%, which is exactly what the semiconductors export controls sought to prevent, according to multiple statements by U.S. officials. So this goes back to what I was saying to you, Carl. The reason we're seeing these irrational policies and these irrational moves by the United States and the Western world is because they see their world or their order being undermined by the global South, specifically and especially the Chinese, as every sanction that they put up, every hurdle that they throw against China, within a week, a month, or 3 months, the next thing you know, China announces a new breakthrough, and it's mind-boggling to them because they've had control of everything so long. And when you rule so long, it really irks you when you can no longer stymie people's growth or control their movement. What do you have to say on that, Carl?
Yeah, and they will still blame China for stealing the IP, even though, if that's something that the United States don't have. It's like, well, why can't you do what China did? They're like, oh, DeepSeek is doing better because they stole our intellectual property. Well, what's preventing you from stealing from DeepSeek and be better at them? It's like does not make sense. And again, this goes back to what we said earlier about U.S. going around the world lighting fire to create instability. So this way they can present United States as the oasis of calm. Mm-hmm. So where you should park your money in U.S. dollars. And this particularly applies to places flush with oil wealth like the Middle East. And this is why U.S. is totally destabilizing the region right now. If we recall, Trump signed this deal where he proclaimed that U.S. is going to get $500 billion investment into AI. Now, where that $500 billion is going to come from? Trump signed this agreement with the CEO and founder of SoftBank. Now, SoftBank doesn't have $500 billion. Where's Son Masashi going to get that money from? The money is supposed to come from the Middle East. They're going after. They're trying to convince all these oil sheiks in the Gulf to come up with the money so they can pump into this AI pyramid scheme in United States. And this is why they really hate China, because when DeepSeek comes out, people are like, wait, so you want $500 billion, but DeepSeek, they train their AI with like $5 million. Why? There's a huge price difference. Why are you demanding $500 billion of investment? And again, and this is this is because what their whole plan was to blow up the world, fostering instability in the Middle East. So all these oil wealthy countries, they have no choice but park their money into U.S. and into like boondoggle investment like OpenAI, and China just come out and blow out their whole scheme out of the water with this DeepSeek thing. And now they're saying, okay, they don't even need the NVIDIA chips for training purposes, because initially they said, DeepSeek is good, but they still need NVIDIA chips to train, but then they can run on Huawei chips for inference, for like serving up results and stuff. And now they're saying actually they don't need NVIDIA chips for training anymore. They can use domestic China-made chips like Huawei Zen chips for training as well. Then that means China now have a nearly complete 100% semiconductor chain, from design to manufacturing to the downstream product like AI, like AI training. And so this is really bad news. This is really bad news. This is why when DeepSeek came out, you wiped more than $1 trillion off the U.S. stock market, because they popped the AI bubble. It's like, why do you need $500 billion to power OpenAI when Chinese can do it for $5 million? I mean, China has been doing this across a whole swath of industry, and now they're doing it to AI. And this is why you're absolutely right. This is why they're panicking. They can't compete with that. They can't compete with the China price. And the common reframe is, oh, China are doing it because they have slave labor. What the hell are you talking about? They have robots building electric cars in like completely lights off factories. It's lights off because they don't have humans. They just have robots on the assembly line. And you think China used slave labor? Well, yeah, okay, if you can call the robots slave labor, sure. They have robot slaves working 24/7 to crank out these products. And this is the real reason why United States cannot compete. They're falling behind in almost every facet of manufacturing, and now they're even falling behind in supposedly cutting edge stuff like AI. So, we're gonna see a lot of copium, come out. This is one area United States will always lead China. It's a copium production, because as China rises and U.S. continue to decline, the copium level in the West is going to rise to the new heights, unprecedented heights we've never seen before. They're going to come up with all kind of reasons why China is ahead.
Mm-hmm. And Flying Crocodile says doing it with AI and also with quantum computer chips 1,000 times faster than Google's Sycamore processor. See, this is what I'm saying. A lot of the average person doesn't understand how the manufacturing and how the economics of these things play into the military actions of the United States, and how as the more they see their position erode, the more desperate they become. And so they feel that before I let anybody else rise above me, I'll burn the whole world down.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is the case. I mean, like, there's a lot of people with those kind of crazy mentalities that's in the position of power in the U.S. I'm still counting on their own self-preservation instinct. I'm still counting on the fact that maybe the Pentagon top brass are more interested in comfortable retirement in Bahamas with their ill-gotten kickbacks than going down in a nuclear fire. So I'm still hopeful. But that doesn't exclude some crazies like in some think tank somewhere, coming up with these dark fantasies about how U.S. is gonna, destroy the world. I myself, I'm optimistic because I have to be, because I have children. I do want to have a future for them. So I'm still here laughing at the shit show that's going on back home in U.S. But I hope. I think what we are lucky is the Chinese leadership are much more rational. They're much more rational than those crazies in Washington, and so far they have been fairly restrained in the face of all these crazy provocations from the hawks in U.S. And because they understand the time is on their side, they can just keep on doing what they're doing, what they have been doing, which is focus on developing China, and that in itself will put them, above U.S. in the long run, and that strategy is working, and they're going to keep doing it, and they're not responding to these provocations for conflict and war, and that is actually keeping us from World War III right now.
I believe exactly what you said, but looking on the flip side, the U.S. and the West understand that time is not on their side. This is what I keep telling people. They understand that as long as China and the global South continue on their way doing what they're doing, they realize that this will be a detriment to Western hegemony. So in their eyes, we must do any and everything that we can to aggravate, to destabilize, to even provoke a reaction to our actions, so that we can justify some type of war or some type of bringing down of the whole thing. Because if we in our minds, if we could bring it down, maybe we'll have a hand in rebuilding up a new system. They don't understand that this is the end of Western hegemony, period.
Yeah, I don't think how they can save it. Even the gardener Joseph Borrell has said, though, the era of Western dominance is over, man. It's all over for the garden. The jungle is gonna take over. You cannot fight the jungle. I live in a jungle. I can see how a jungle can grow. All you need is sunshine and rain.
Yeah. So we're going to bring this to a conclusion. I want to thank my friend, my co-host Carl, for coming on the platform. Carl, in closing, do you have anything to say to the people?
I'd say keep hope. Keep the hopes up. I do believe in the long run, a better, more optimistic future is possible. Even though things may look bleak if you right now live in the imperial core like United States, but I mean, like this kind of the history, the relentless marching of history. Sometimes it's cyclical, but it's always heading up. It might not go up in a straight line, in a linear fashion. There's going to be a lot of dips and downs, but eventually, things are still marching toward progress. So this is my hope. Keep hoping.